the best way to start is to play the games I already have access to. Now, I played all of these games, which is great, but there are still so many that I can play online for free. I should play all of those games. Now I hear the objection there. The objection is you can't judge a game by playing it online. Online play and in-person play are totally different things. That is true. That is true. So the month isn't over yet, and I think I got everything here that's new. I played Nemesis, Lockdown, Ark Nova, Hamlet, Tobago, Tzolk'in, Deus, Dungeon Petz, Railways of the World, and Seasons. And those are the ones I wrote. I may have played some more. Nemesis, Lockdown, Ark Nova, and Hamlet were in person. The other ones were digital. Okay? So we'll go through each one. First of all, Nemesis, Lockdown. I asked, what's the difference between Nemesis, Lockdown, and Nemesis? I'd heard of Nemesis before. Evidently, they are basically the same thing. You're experiencing different rooms. I really thought this was a game I was going to love. No, didn't like it. Way too complex. We were constantly referring to the rule book. Oh, what are you supposed to do when this happens? What are you supposed to do when this happens? Like, it was an extremely cinematic experience. Oh my gosh, it was like acting out a movie. If you're into that, oh man, it's so well done. If you want a cinematic, you know what? It's not a game. It's an adventure you experience. That could be really cool. The components are great. The events are really interesting. But oh my goodness, it was not fun. We were constantly looking at the rule book. Now, if that was the only game I played, if I played that like every week, if I got really familiar with it, if I understood everything that was going on, I think it'd be probably a lot better. But there were just so many intricacies with the way cards worked and aliens and all this stuff. Super disappointed based on how much I've heard about that game that's good. Ark Nova, played that in person. If you're subscribing to this channel and you watch all my videos, then you already know that this was the big surprise. I thought Ark Nova was going to suck. It reminded me a lot of Terraforming Mars and Wingspan and like Everdell and games that I kind of don't like or I criticize heavily. And this game was just such a great experience. I brought it to my board game night and played it with some other like really experienced players. Everyone said they would play it again next week. And that's saying something because we basically play something new every week. For somebody to request a repeat game it's a big deal in my group. Played it with the wife. She loved it. Played with friends. Like, just a really fun game. I have some criticisms of it, but you know what? Sometimes when a game is just so much fun, like, I'm able to overlook some of my criticisms. For more details on that, you can check out the review. Hamlet. Wait, I didn't play Hamlet in person. I played it on Tabletopia. It felt like it was in person because I did it on a video call. But I played a digital implementation of it. Oops, my bad, I misspoke. But Hamlet was buggy. I signed up for the Kickstarter. I'm excited for it. It's a beautiful game. I liked it a lot. I'm not sure if I'm going to like highly recommend it as the best game that I played this month. I had some criticisms, especially about the gaming conditions. It's a game that I think is really fun if you can get into the theme. It feels like you're building a hamlet, which is a small town. But if you're a competitive player, I think you're really going to have some criticisms with the way the game ends and how deterministic the scorekeeping is. Like, it's the kind of game where if you go through the effort, you can know exactly what the score is. And then when one player does one more action, the game ends. So as a result, the person who's ahead is always motivated to end the game, and everybody else is like motivated to make the game last as long as possible. And I wish there was something that balanced that out, which, by the way, I should mention, I talked about this back in January, but Imperial Steam fixes that problem. In Imperial Steam, you have a gaming condition that's satisfied, or the game just ends after a certain number of rounds. I like that way of ending a game a lot better. Imperial Steam. So, I have to say something about Tobago. Tobago is a recommendation that came to me when I did a video on deduction type games. Now, when Cryptid first came out, it was compared to Tobago because the two games are seen as opposites. In Tobago, or rather in Cryptid, there is a definite location of it, something that all players are looking for, and they have to reveal the location of this lost thing by playing hints throughout the course of the game. In Tobago, it isn't known at the beginning of the game where the treasure is, but players determine where it is based on the cards that they play. So, if you play correctly, you can kind of put the treasure in one place or another and kind of manipulate the map. But in terms of execution, Cryptid is so much more fluid and more interesting to play and lends itself to an ease that is completely lacking in Tobago. I have so many complaints about how that game was executed, the using of the squares to like mark where stuff can be, the cards that you have, like you can have cards that just suck and that you have to use your entire turn to discard your hand and draw new cards, moving your ATV around. There were just so many extra pieces. I would rather play a game that plays smoothly than a game that just has a bunch of junk. I did not like it. I played it digital implementation, so maybe I don't know for sure, but nope. Rather play Cryptid. Tzolk'in is a game that I was always attracted to because of the gears. It looked so freaking cool, right? I think it seems very comparable to Russian Railroads in a way. I mean, it's basically a worker placement game. You know what you're going to get. And like Russian Railroads, there's kind of a level of abstraction. Thematically, this is not a very thematic game. It feels a little bit more abstract. It has a very interesting mechanic, but for some reason between the two games, I wasn't nearly as interested as Tzolk'in as I am Russian Railroads, but I can see how having a physical copy of this game would be a lot more interesting because of the rotation of the gears. I think that game depends heavily on the physical components. It was not a very cool online implementation, but I'm willing to try it out in person. I think it could actually be really, really cool. So that's where I land with that. Deus. Played it on Board Game Arena. I don't even want to talk about it. It was boring on a million levels. This game, it looked a lot like Catan in terms of like you're building buildings on these tiles, not adjacent to them, and then you are like whether or not you have a good move or a bad move just depends on the cards you draw. So you're drawing cards, and if you don't like them, you can use your turn to discard your cards and draw more cards. And then eventually, if you get cards you use, you can play them. In my turn, I never drew green cards. Green cards are how you get resources. I was getting money, but it just was so tactical. It was extremely tactical. It was not very strategic, and the gameplay was so meaningless feeling. Now, maybe in a physical copy, gameplay would be more smooth. It was very lackluster. Dungeon Petz is designed by a great designer whose name I can never say, the guy who did Codenames and Mage Knight. Worker placement, you're trying to treat your animals, you're using cards in order to fulfill their needs and sell them. Yeah, it's something that I've seen on shelves forever. Like, whenever I go to a board game store, I always see a copy of Dungeon Petz, so I was curious about it, but it's kind of an older game, and today it doesn't have anything that gives it really lasting appeal. Railways of the World. So, Railways of the World is the kind of game I would recommend if you were really into train-themed board games. And it comes to also, Steam is a lot like this game as well. Which, by the way, you can get an iOS version of. I played Steam on iOS long before I played Railways of the World. It feels like it's probably the best implementation of a Railroads game that I've ever played. But it doesn't feel as competitive. I like Imperial Steam. Imperial Steam feels like a competitive railway game. This one is a lot more Euro, and by the way, speaking of competitive railway games, also Russian Railroads, also very competitive, and you're interfering with other players. This one, I can see how you could get really into it, and as you get more and more into it, it can be more competitive, and you gain that insight where you see, for example, it has a bid for first player mechanic in it. As I'm playing it online, I don't feel motivated to bid for first player. It's just not the moves aren't important enough to me. It feels like regardless of when I go, I'm still going to get a good move. And there's competition for the different cards and the resources that you're moving around to get points. Excellent thematic game. Not a very compelling competitive game. Yeah, Railways of the World. And then Seasons. Now, Seasons is a game I'm excited about because it's highly rated on the Board Game Geek Top 100 list. So I wanted to play it because I recently started this series about games that you should play and games that you should avoid. And I get the games that you should avoid by highly rated, or what I think are overrated games, from Board Game Geek. And I loved Seasons because I think it's entirely overrated. Oh my goodness, I hated this game. Digital implementation, I do believe if I played it in person, I could be won over by it. This is a dice drafting game. You roll the dice, people take a dice, some of the dice can be used to play cards, otherwise you're using them to convert them to points, but it is dull. I don't know, like, if I'm going to play a dice drafting game, I liked Trois dice much better. I think I played Trois dice last month. I don't know if Seasons is so bad, but it is so much more dull than I expected it to for being such a highly rated game. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is looking for my games to play instead of Seasons. So I get excited. Nemesis and Seasons are definitely on the don't play these suck. We'll see. Now, having given you my reviews on all the games, of course my best game of this month was Ark Nova, and then probably Hamlet after that. If you have a game that you would highly recommend, will you please let me know in the comments? I need to find some good stuff for April. Thanks for watching. Hopefully I will see you next month. Bye-bye.